Hey guys, welcome back to Shep Talk and welcome back to Shep Talk Movie Reviews. Before we get into this review though, a quick admin note. If you haven't done so already, hit that like, share, and subscribe button. It does help my channel out greatly, and I do truly appreciate it. Now guys, back to our review of George Foreman, the miraculous story of the once and future heavyweight champion of the world. And now that is the last time I'm going to refer to that title, or that movie. That title is just crazy bonkers that they went that long with that title. I didn't even realize that was the full title until like IMDb'd it, because like even in the movie theaters, it's like Big George Foreman. Everybody refers to it as Big George Foreman. So that is all I'm going to say about that title. Now, Big George Foreman was directed by George Tillman Jr. It was written by Frank Baldwin, George Tillman Jr., and Dan Gordon. Stars Chris Davis, Jasmine Matthews, Sullivan Jones, and the great Forrest Whitaker. Quick synopsis: Big George Foreman is based on the life and career of George Foreman, the heavyweight boxing champion. So yeah, it's pretty much plain and dry. It's his life from, I'm gonna say roughly probably about 8 years old until like they go to the second time he starts boxing. With this being a story about George Foreman, we follow Foreman through his life, hitting on, I wouldn't say high spots, at least not at the beginning of the story, but spots or times in his life with that kind of impacted his life or changed his life for better or for worse. We get shown George at a young age. Like I said, I think he's probably about 8 or 9, maybe 10, where he's getting bounced around from school to school due to pretty much his anger issues. He is one of those people that does not handle confrontation really well. He is one of those people that he's going to answer with his fists, and boy does he. But this also gets him kicked out of a lot of schools. For a kid his age and his situation, that's not the greatest of choices going forward. And then we flash forward to, I'd say, his late teen years. He's probably 18, 19 years old. And George Foreman is hanging out with people that are probably not the best for him. He's pretty much hanging outside of bars, waiting for people that are, intoxicated pretty much, to coming out and walking. And then him and his buddies jump these people. And this, of course, leads to George Foreman running into the law. And I think that's what kind of scares him straight, is that he finally figures out that going down this path, he's not going to have a long life, or his life is not going to really be anything meaningful. And during that walk, he sees an advertisement for something called the Job Corps. And so he's like, you know what? They're offering me 3 square meals. They're offering me training for a job, kind of giving me a future. And so he goes to his mom and he's like, hey mom, I kind of want to do this, try to set my feet on the right path, and go from there. And his mom is like, if this is something you want to do, George, I'll fully support it, but do not come home due to your anger issues or getting into fights again, pretty much. And so she sets the line for him. She tells him, you gotta see this through, and you gotta not use your fists, but you gotta use your mind. And so then we flash forward to George going to the Job Corps, and he's having trouble fitting in, right? He's this big black guy. He doesn't really have a lot of skill sets. He doesn't have a lot of friends. He's not very interactive or personable with these people. And so he clashes with them a lot. And of course his anger issues do come to fruition once again, because that's George. He doesn't handle confrontation or handle issues very well. He will automatically go to his fists. And so we finally meet Doc, who is played by Forrest Whitaker, and Doc is like, we're kicking you out. You violated our rules. You know that you're not supposed to be doing what you're doing. And he gets him in the car and he's like, let's take you to the bus. And George, while he's in the car, is just pleading with Doc. He's like, Doc, I can't do this. I made a promise to my mom. I can't come back to her like this. I got to make something of my life. And lo and behold, Doc shows compassion to George and gives George a second chance, but he has to start learning boxing. So it's not fighting, it's boxing. Boxing has a set of rules. You got to follow these rules, but you can use your fist and and take out some of that anger on your opponent. And it just so happens that this is really fits George's wheelhouse, and he takes to it really well. And we know how that goes for George. George takes to it very, very well. Doc wants him to kind of be on a slow, steady pace, and hit these mile markers. He's like, we'll start with getting you some fights, then we'll get you into the Olympics, and then we'll get you professional, so forth and so forth. But George is like, nah, I want to get into the Olympics in 1 year, and he's just like, I'm going to do this and this and this, and we jump. And that's where we get these jumps, the highlights. We get the jump to the Olympics. We get the jump to George doing professional boxing and winning after winning after winning. And we finally get to see him at Joe Frazier and him winning the heavyweight champion, or title of the world, or heavyweight champion of the world, however you say it. I'm not a big boxing fan. I was back when I grew up, but haven't been for ages. And this is where Hollywood really would have ended for us, right? Because George Foreman, now the heavyweight champion of the world, and then he lives happily ever after. But this is the life of George Foreman, and so that's not Hollywood. George Foreman doesn't end there. He has a life to go. This is what, early 70s? So yeah, Hollywood doesn't end. George Foreman doesn't end. His story keeps going. And what do I mean by that? I mean, Muhammad Ali enters the picture. Muhammad Ali was a former heavyweight champion of the world, lost his belt. Frazier took it. Muhammad Ali sees George Foreman win the belt, and he starts speaking. You know Muhammad Ali. If you don't know Muhammad Ali, go look up like him. If you've heard like move like a butterfly, sting like a bee, that's Muhammad Ali. He was a great kind of cerebral assassin. He would get on people. He would get inside people's heads mentally and then take them out physically. And that's what he does with George Foreman. He studies Foreman, knows what Foreman's weaknesses are, and that's when everything comes crashing down for George Foreman. Well, stop. We'll rewind a little bit. That's not precisely when everything, but that is probably like the pinnacle of when stuff started crashing for Foreman. Foreman, once he wins heavyweight champion of the world, starts letting that popularity and fame go to his head. He has women throwing themselves at him. He obviously is not, I'm not going to say he's not strong-willed. He just is very tempted and does take part. He lets himself be led astray. And so he has many affairs. His wife finds out about these affairs because for some reason, I don't know if it's just George's capacity or just they didn't do it back in the day, but these women have his phone number and they call his house, which I'm like, that is why. If you know this man is married and you're going to be having an affair with him, calling his house is not going to help. But that's the start of his downfall for George Foreman, is he wins fame, he wins popularity, he wins the belt, and he starts having these affairs. His marriage starts hitting the rocks, and he doesn't know where to go from there. His wife, files for divorce, takes the kids, and George Foreman is all alone while now he's preparing for this fight with Muhammad Ali, who is just, every interview he's just going after Foreman. Foreman is probably taking this way too personally. He's pretty much hates Muhammad Ali at this point. And we get to the match, and it's just a kind of like schooling of how to take down Foreman. Foreman is this big powerhouse. He always KOs his opponents. They never really last until like the 12th round, where Muhammad Ali is taking this and he goes, you know what? I bet you his stamina is not all that. He ends these matches very quickly, and I bet you if we take him further, that I will be able to take him out. And it's just like, it is a beautiful thing. You can YouTube it or go watch this movie as well and see that match. And that is when things really just hit rock bottom for George Foreman. He's lost his family. He's lost his belt. So pretty much everything he's cared about in this world is gone. He does like these circus kind of matches, these 5v1 matches and stuff like that, and then he finally hits like rock bottom, where he pretty much dies and is brought back, and that changes his life forever. And he's like, you know what? Boxing is not going for me the way I wanted to go for, so I am just going to go ahead and hang it up. I've found God. I'm going to become a preacher. And he does. He does that really well for a while. He opens up a church. He finds another woman that he loves and adores. He opens a youth community center. He's having the good life. Again, this could probably be, again, where we hang it up. Hollywood ending, let's go, George. He's happy, life goes on. But no. George trusted the wrong person for his finances. I can't remember the guy's name. But, yeah. And he loses everything. So, now George has to come back from where he was going. Or from that. He wants to help his community. He wants to continue preaching. But all his finances, those properties were tied into those finances. So we get George going back into the boxing ring. This man is 40 plus years old, going back into the boxing. He's trying to make that money. But he does. He works it out. He loses the weight. He gains the strength again. And he starts proving the boxing community wrong, that he can come back and box. Which just goes, this is the Hollywood ending we were looking for. He comes back, wins money that the community center and his church are set. They won't need any more money for the rest of his life. And he even takes back the belt that he lost. He is now again the heavyweight champion of the world for boxing. And that's pretty much it. We see, this is me trying to, get back in these reviews. This movie is a standard movie with, I would say, if it wasn't for these actors, this would just be a regular TV, documentary movie. Might be a Netflix documentary, might be, something else. But these actors brought it, man. I give these actors props. If it wasn't for them, I don't think this movie would have been half as good as it is. I went in there not knowing. I knew like the overview of George Foreman's life. Like I said, I knew when he came back. That was probably more of when I paid more attention to George Foreman, is when this 40-year-old came back into the boxing world and was making waves. Because his career is pretty much over when I was born. So people talked about George Foreman, but I never really got to see a live match of George Foreman, especially back when he was in his prime, in his 20s. But so this movie was entertaining. This movie kept me glued to the big screen. It did an excellent job. If you don't know anything about George Foreman, give it a chance. And with all that being said, guys, I'm going to give George Foreman 4 Sheps out of 5. Go check it out. You won't be disappointed. But guys, that is all I got time for today. If you haven't done so already, please remember to like, share, and subscribe. It does help my channel out greatly, and I do truly appreciate it. But that is all I have time for today. Thank you very much, and I'll see you in the next review.